going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Viall Files, Going Deeper edition. Boy, do we have a great episode for you today. I'm Nick, your host, joined by Allie in studio. Amanda is abroad or, I don't know, home. I don't know.
This is like in New York, but
not here.
Surrounded by some beautiful Native American art because my grandmother loves Native American art. So
right.
I would consider myself a little Santa Fe in New York.
All right.
Fun.
All right. We have a great episode for you today. Dr. Maya Shankar is with us today, the behavioral scientist who's been on our show before. She's also worked for the Obama White House. She works for Google. A lot of interesting things in regards to behavior and habits. And with it being the new year and people constantly talking about New Year's resolutions and hopefully starting new habits, we brought in the expert to talk about how to actually maybe accomplish some of these goals. And we get into a bunch of other cool stuff as it relates to healthy behaviors and habits and relationships and keeping the spark alive. And it's always great.
Identity.
It was great. You're definitely, well, you've already downloaded it. So here we are.
Thank you.
So thank you. So keep listening. Okay. Is there anything, before we get to Dr. Maya, is there anything we've missed that there's a lot, there seems to be a lot going on. Like,
okay. Holidays and traveling, I want to touch on TJ and Amy because I heard that they spent Christmas together. Like, they're just like not being subtle in the slightest. Remember we talked about
Do you think they should be subtle? I mean, if they're together.
I say pop off too much. But like, live your life.
I say, yeah. The picture I took with TJ and Amy, I feel like it's upped its value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's valuable currency.
Oh, yeah.
You're basically their third wheel.
I'm going to drop an NFT with me, TJ, and Amy.
I think you can argue, like, if the whole point of two hosts is to have chemistry, they understood the assignment almost too much. And I think it would be wonderful to watch it play out on national television.
Yeah, put them back on TV. I want to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting more press for GMA3 than ever.
I say put them back on
I've never been more into... What was the reason they got taken off the air or temporarily?
Because they said it was like the scandal and they didn't want, it was like the whispering in the hallways. Like, it's too much.
They didn't want to distract from the hard-hitting news.
That ABC does.
Yeah.
Which, I was on GMA3 to promote my book, but I feel like we could still have promoted it.
Even if they had been happily a couple and out at that point.
Yeah. It could have been an even better interview. You know, we could have really got into it.
You could have read them passages and asked how it applies to their relationship.
Yeah. So, but they're like full on together.
Yeah.
Full on together, spent the holidays together. There's many, many pictures. There was one article that was like, they're making out like teens in Miami. And I was like, so you mean making out?
Like teens.
Like teens. Only teens make out. I mean, listen, like there was some infidelity, it seems like there. We don't condone that. I mean, and for the spouses who, you know, and who knows? We don't really know the full scope of these relationships or how they were. Mm-hmm. Maybe there was an understanding already. Like, who knows? Like, maybe they were kind of already separated. I have no idea. But I think any criticism coming their way probably is coming from the camp of not condoning infidelities. Mm-hmm. But as someone who doesn't know anything about the details of any of these relationships, I mean, if they're together, they should just be together, and I don't think they should hide.
Yeah.
You know, it was the hiding that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like we're treating this like a murder investigation. And it's like, have you guys been following the story of the very tragic Idaho murders?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's gotten really crazy now. It's truly like CSI level because the person who they arrested and have in custody was studying
criminology.
Criminology.
It's almost too crazy to be true.
Well, and he was arrested in Pennsylvania, right? And from what I read,
he's from there.
His dad, didn't he and his dad drive from where the murders happened to Pennsylvania? Like, were his parents hiding him?
Oh, and
where's the line? Like, with your child?
There's a girl on TikTok claiming to be his ex-girlfriend. She's making a lot of TikToks about it. I don't know how I feel about how do we feel about that nowadays? With like, I mean, I'm assuming all her TikToks are about she's been popping off.
Yeah, how do we feel about that? Because it's funny how like all of these things, the second it was announced that he was arrested, all of these people were kind of coming forward with details, whether it was people who'd gone to high school with him, or I know when he'd been a TA, people were coming forward and saying he was apparently really harsh and would grade everyone extremely low grades, and the whole class complained to the professor, and that he would write these very long like criticisms. And it's, it's all this stuff where it's like you have no idea what's relevant and what's not. And is it?
Yeah, like just because he was kind of a perfectionist or a dick doesn't mean he's a murderer. But maybe all of these little things played in the role of his like psychology of like who he was. And is it like, was this like the first of what could have been many? Like, is this like serial killer like mentality? Because it seems like this was like an arbitrary killing.
Well, it happened on the 13th of November, and after Thanksgiving break, only 9,000 out of 11,000 students on the campus did not return, because I think there was absolute terror, because it was this out of nowhere crime in a place that hadn't had a murder in, I think, 7 years or something crazy. So it's like, it really does kind of like you make you quake in your boots, because it's just, you have no idea like what's going on or what.
Did you hear about him? Apparently he called into some show too. And he was like speculating about who the murderer could be.
No way.
Well, that's how I found out who this girl who's claiming to be a boyfriend. She's claiming to have been his girlfriend. And she's also saying that she thinks that's his voice. It sounds like him. It was like a really weird call. It's floating around on TikTok.
Okay.
And this person on the other end of the phone sounds kind of weird. And they had like a real like interesting opinions on the case, but it was like, which would make sense.
Someone that went to high school with him said like he was always very dominant and would like put me in headlocks and like was just like kind of like this very, I don't know, violent, handsy person.
Like aggressive.
Aggressive,
kind of like
yeah.
Yes, that stuff like that, it's hard to like, again, there's a big gap between, authoritative figure. My brother, who's a cop, is a bit of an authoritative figure. He likes to be in charge. Like, that's murdering 4 random college students is a big leap.
So I guess Brian's dad, when they did the cross-country road trip for 2.5 days, said that he was acting normal and not out of character, despite having just committed. Like, it's like, that's almost like weirder to me. Like, you can be completely normal and calm after killing people.
Well, I mean, sure. But he also killed 4, like he randomly killed 4 people. So like, yeah, because it doesn't seem, this wasn't like a crime of passion, or like it sounded like one of those movies where someone's trying to get away with the perfect murder and didn't.
Jump in the car. Time for
a
cross-country road
trip. What would
they
they have done had they not gotten caught?
Probably continue doing it.
Right?
Yeah.
Or isn't that the mentality?
So creepy. And it is like crazy the way it turns like everybody on the internet into a journalist, being like, I knew XYZ, like trying to piece it together. Oh, wait, but speaking of journalists, did you guys see that Barbara Walters passed away?
Yeah.
Sad.
Oh, icon.
R.I.P.
We used to watch 2020.
The hard-hitting questions.
There was a moment in my childhood that every Friday, me and my mom and my parents, we'd like eat ice cream and watch 2020 on Friday nights when Barbara was headlining 2020.
Love that. I saw a TikTok and it was like me after I've had several drinks, and it was just a compilation of like her hard-hitting questions. It's like, how did you know your father, like blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yep.
Especially presidents. Like she would get get interviews with presidents, be like, talk about your relationship with your mom. And I was like, me on a first date.
Yeah. Yeah.
Barbara, what a legend.
Ugh.
R.I.P.
Truly.
Do we all want to ask each other a very intense, do we have any hard-hitting
what's your
questions
biggest
we
regret?
want to ask each other?
What's my biggest? That's not a hard-hitting question.
Well, answer it then.
What's my biggest regret? I was gonna make a joke. I don't want you guys to cry today.
Oh, you're gonna be like hiring you.
That's too. Yeah, I was. That's not a hard-hitting questions are more specific about.
Do you consider yourself better than your bachelor peers, Nick?
That's not.
He doesn't like our questions, but he's still not answering them.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Just not. Yeah, it's got to be.
Well, you come up with one then.
Well, I don't. This game was a good try. I don't know.
This game was a good try. Barbara, we need you back.
Well, I think we are going to get some hard-hitting questions on did you guys see there's an interview coming up released this coming Sunday with Harry and Anderson Cooper. Our widow nepotism baby.
Yeah, what are
nepo baby.
What are hard-hitting questions we'd ask Harry, you know?
Well, he said there was like a little pull quote of him saying that he wants to basically get back on good terms with his brother and his father. And I just thought that was so ironic because I'm like, as we've discussed on all of our coverage of the Harry and Meghan thing, that's probably not the best way to go about doing that. They clearly don't like all these public interviews, the tell-alls.
Or saying that publicly. My question to Harry would be, what, if anything, do you think you have to apologize or are responsible for the falling out with your family?
Oh, yeah. Do we think Anderson Cooper was the right person to do the interview?
Yeah, I feel like Anderson Cooper is a good journalist.
Yeah.
I think he asked some tough questions.
Yeah. I'll watch it. I'm excited to see
Do you
it.
think Anderson Cooper will ask tough questions, or it will just be like hanging out with Harry?
I know. That's what I'm afraid of.
Like, and I don't think there's a right or wrong. Like, are there hard questions? Like, I know some of the fans will want the hard-hitting questions, but like, is this he isn't interviewing a president. He's not a head of state. He's not like, this is not like, when you think of hard-hitting questions, it's like, yeah, these people are in charge of like real policy and like.
It's also definitely promo for his book coming out as well. So it's like, is it going to be more of a tease of things that we can learn in the book? Like, I don't know where promo and.
I just don't, I just think at some point they need to take some ownership of whatever role they're playing in this dynamic.
Yeah.
Right or wrong. I don't think they just can keep coming out and.
I want to know what William's text was to Harry after the Oprah interview.
Well, he won't share that.
That's what I want Anderson to ask.
When is this interview?
I believe it comes out on
It's
Sunday.
coming out this Sunday.
Yeah.
Ooh, well, we can talk about it in freestyle next week.
Harry and Meghan keeping us busy.
I hope Harry doesn't sound. I mean, I don't want Harry to sound whiny.
I don't think he will. I think he came across very well in their
documentary. He did. But I just, like, enough is enough of complaining about your situation.
Is it complaining or is it explaining?
It sounds like complaining to some people.
I would be really curious how Harry personally feels, because I think, so much of like the topic of like the documentary and discourse and that has existed around Meghan has been like the role of like, what is it to have an actress and like a woman of color welcomed into this institution? And I would be curious how Harry personally feels about his role in that, and like whether he feels like he should have protected her more, or whether he feels like he should have foreseen the hostile environment that like, such a colonial and white like institution has. And I would really kind of wonder like what his thoughts around that were.
I kind of feel like they touched on that in their series though too. Like he talks about he could anticipate it, but yeah, the race element was completely different than it was for Kate, than it was for Diana. That's what he brought up to his family of why it was so different.
Yeah, I feel like he touched on that a lot.
Yeah.
On the documentary.
Yeah, I guess I'm more just like curious, like him on a personal level. Like, does he, like, to what extent he feels like a sense of like responsibility?
Well, I don't think that would be.
I think he does feel bad. It's like
a hard-hitting question.
It's like how he said he feels responsible for Meghan and her dad's falling out.
I'm actually less curious about. I'm more curious about his actual relationship with his family
and
his
anything
father.
To do with Meghan.
Yeah, then like, because Meghan almost seems like a easy scapegoat of like, of blame, like
even the phrase Megxit, like it's all on
blaming
her.
Meghan for this fallout, or this relationship with Meghan has something to do with the fallout, and like maybe that played a role, but like I just don't think. I think if you have a fallout with family, other people, outsiders can be a catalyst, but there has to be already damage and scars and fractions in a relationship for you to allow if other people are playing a role and are pulling you apart. I feel like there already has to be wounds and things like that. And I am more curious at this point and finding out what those and finding out Harry's relationship with William and his father that has nothing to do with Meghan leading up to the point where he met Meghan, rather than trying to like the pointing of the finger and like this whole Harry, with anything to do with Harry and
what's
Meghan.
The context.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, fine. Like they're together, they're in love, they left, fine. Like at the end, I'm willing to just chalk it up to like they just wanted a different life than the institution wanted for them. And whether some people agree with that or disagree with that, it's their life. They have the right to choose that. But in terms of Harry having a relationship with his family, I am curious about that dynamic, especially as it relates to anything not Meghan related.
Well, I wonder also, I think for me, like the security element that was discussed in Harry and Meghan is really relevant in terms of like, as much as I just feel like that was kind of next level in terms of like the conflict that you may have interpersonally between a family versus the way it seemed like his family. And who knows, maybe the 3 weeks that have passed, they would have seen like how atrocious the hounding was and like would have kind of like stepped up and provided security again. But like that to me feels like a real point of no return, that his family was going to like leave him vulnerable and like put him and his wife and his children.
Yeah, but
like,
also they have to
harm.
respond to people with budgets and taxpayers. And are the British taxpayers going to pay for them over in Canada when they're no longer
and that's what I mean,
part
like,
of the family?
It's not that like I get Harry and Meghan wanted to explain their side of the story, and the difference between explanation or complaining again is the eye and the beholder. But at the end of the day, until I don't think we ever will hear the other side. At this point, it just sounds like until the other side can share their side, I think it behooves them to maybe just not keep throwing stones, even if those are justifiable stones, like especially in the public forum, because whether you're justified or not, if your ultimate goal is to reconcile, then it's not going to feel like a justification to the other side. It's just going to feel like more airing of dirty laundry.
I saw a photo of how Kate and William were just in Boston. I saw some photos that people took of like them on a commercial flight to Boston. Like I think they were in the more like business class, first class area, but like they were for sure on a commercial flight overseas. And I was like, good for them. Living the normal life.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope they had to. Boston luggage baggage claim is egregious. I apologize to anybody who works there. I'm sure there are circumstances beyond your control. But Boston,
my guess is they don't hang out waiting for their luggage.
Probably not.
Probably not. Anyway,
but the car has to hang out. It takes so long.
Yeah.
I'm using my platform for something I'm passionate about, and it is the system of baggage claims in Logan.
Well, let's I'm glad we could bring awareness to that. All right, well, it's time for learning some new behaviors. Let's get into it.
So I feel like we're entering the time of our life, maybe Amanda, you agree with this, where people our age are like starting to get married or thinking about having kids. And I feel like a lot of that is still mysterious. And there's this mentality of, oh, we'll just like wait and see, or we're trying. But we have the technology and the power to know, what our bodies are doing. If we're having any sort of fertility issues, 1 in 8 couples struggles with infertility. And now we have tools from Modern Fertility to help us know what's going on with our bodies, know how to prep for things.
Yeah, one of my best friends is experiencing fertility challenges, and I feel it's like makes my heart break hearing about going to doctors and not getting answers, and just how there's these long turnaround times where it's like to even understand the results of a test, the follow-up appointment isn't for months.
It can be confusing. You have to like try to find different doctors, and tests can be very, very expensive. But Modern Fertility is the opposite. So it's like easy, it's affordable. You can test your fertility hormones at home with a simple finger prick. You can mail it with a prepaid label. They've like literally taken out all of the legwork for you, and you get your personalized results within 6 business days. Traditional hormone testing at a fertility clinic can cost over $600, but Modern Fertility tests the same general set of hormones for only $179. And if you go to modernfertility.com/VIALL, you can get $20 off your test. So then it becomes $159, which is a hell of a lot better than $600.
Plus, you can get reimbursed for the test through your FSA or HSA. So there's that possibility too. Yeah.
So if you want kids today or maybe one day in the future, clinically sound info about your body can help you make the decision that's right for you.
Knowledge is power. It's always good to know, and you can do it very affordably from the comfort of your home. So check out Modern Fertility. Right now, Modern Fertility is offering our listeners $20 off the test when you go to modernfertility.com/VIALL. That means your test will cost $159, which is a fraction of what it costs at fertility clinics. Get $20 off your fertility test when you go to modernfertility.com/VIALL. That's modernfertility.com/VIALL. Maya, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
How-
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I somehow managed to not get sick over the holiday break. So I feel like
Same
that's
to
a
me.
success.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's just
I know. Go
a
us,
round of
right?
applause
Round
for
of
us.
applause
You got
for
sick,
us.
Ellie. You
Oh
can't
my
clap.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It just
Yeah.
felt like
I
it
was
was
clapping for
everywhere.
you.
Clapping for me.
Because
yeah.
I wish I was you.
I've had pretty good luck with that stuff.
Were you around a lot of kids though? I mean, I think that's the key.
I was.
That's impressive.
To
You
not
have an
get
immune
sick.
system of steel.
I feel like I've always had a pretty solid immune system. Yeah. Yay for me.
Yay for you.
Yeah.
Good job, Nick.
Do you usually
now,
get sick?
now
or-
everyone can resent you.
Yeah.
So far, so good. But again, I don't want to, I don't want to jinx anything. So.
Well, I mean, eventually
I don't
we'll
believe in
get sick
jinxing,
again.
so
yeah, we'll
I
get
guess
sick
it's okay.
at some point.
Yeah,
I don't know.
definitely.
Well,
Every time I'm around my nephews, at least I get sick. Little boys.
how old are they?
So the oldest one is 7, and then 5 and 3.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They're carrying some
germ
stuff
carriers.
around.
They're in
Yeah.
a lot of the schools.
Yeah.
Well, it's so great to have you back. It was always fun talking with you when we first had you on. And I know you and I were texting and we thought, well, what a fun way to bring you back to talk about, it's New Year's. People are always talking about New Year's resolutions.
New
It's
year,
always
new you.
New Year, new you. And it seems like really good in theory, hard in practice type of idea. We were talking with our last guest, Heath, we were talking New Year's resolutions a little bit, and how it almost seems like New Year's resolutions are more just like what they really end up being is just like a list of things you're not good at, because it's just, you just kind of like, well, I don't like this about me, or I don't do this enough, or I have to stop doing this. And we just kind of like identify it, and usually it just kind of falls off a few months a few weeks later, a few months if we're lucky. But they don't really become new behaviors or new habits that I think are really required to make something a real part of our lives. And I thought it'd be fun to chat with you about how we might actually be able to do that. Because
Yes.
you have a lot of conversations about this type of stuff in your work and with a lot of important people.
Yeah, I mean, I myself gave up on making New Year's resolutions when I was younger because I was like, what's the point? And so then being trained as a behavioral scientist and actually studying the science of human behavior and motivation and decision making, it's actually changed my own. I mean, when I was texting you, right, I was like, Nick, this stuff has genuinely changed my own life. And I feel like I'm sticking to my goals more than I was before. And so I wanted to just share whatever's worked for me or what the research says.
So
can work.
we might be changing people's lives in this episode if we
Well,
can-
in small ways, at
in
least,
small
I hope.
ways.
But the small ways add up to big ways. So
Shavings make a pile.
Shavings make a pile. That's what we always say on this show. Yeah. All right. So, per your advice, let's figure out how to first identify how we should, what things we should actually try to, what our goals are, what things we can work on, and
Yeah.
then what we can do to help make those goals a reality.
Yeah. So one thing that I've learned in studying the science is that it's super important to be thoughtful about the way in which you're defining your goals. In fact, a lot of the hard work's happening at the goal defining stage, which is something we tend to overlook. We're just like, yeah, I want to get fitter, or I want to eat healthily, or whatever it is. But we can
I want to be off my phone less.
Yes, whatever.
Yeah.
But those goals seem so effortless. And we're like, okay, I already know what my goals are. Now it's just a matter of executing. But we know from research that the way that we frame our goals can have a big impact on motivation levels. So for example, you can frame a goal as an approach goal. So I want to eat healthier foods, or you can frame goals as avoidant goals, right? I want to avoid eating unhealthy foods. And these distinct frames can have a very different impact on motivation. And I would recommend that people experiment with them because some can work well or not well, depending on the domain, right? Like what area of life you're in. But
So there's not one that's necessarily better than the other. It depends on the person.
it can depend on the
Or the
person and the
situation.
activity. However, by and large, the approach goals are better and more motivating, and they lead to greater endurance and resilience and a greater sense of pride in having accomplished the thing.
So I want to eat healthier is better than I want
To avoid unhealthy
eating sugar or whatever. it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can understand why, right? So when you avoid doing something, it's really hard to measure success, right? As you're going through the day, you're like, how many times did I avoid picking up my phone and checking Instagram, right? It's not as measurable as actually creating a goal about the things you do want to do that are easy to quantify and easy to measure. So if you made your goal, I want to take more steps during the day, that's actually something that you can quantify at the end of the day, right? Let's say that's a substitute behavior for picking up your phone. Okay, every time I pick up my phone, I'm actually just going to like walk around my kitchen once.
Like a penance, almost.
Yeah, well, penance, substitution, you could call it either thing, but yes.
The
Like
Catholic
yeah,
and he was thrown
Catholic,
out. Yeah.
But I'm curious to know from the three of you if you've ever had this experience where when you had like an abstinence goal, right? Like I'm trying not to do something. Over time, you just kind of lose some of the motivation, right? It's just not as energizing as racing towards something, right? Feeling like there's actually a concrete
thing
set of
that
actions.
you're abstaining from, it also then almost puts that on a pedestal,
Definitely.
you know, of like a cheat day.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like if you abstain from something, then all of a sudden you have cheat days, and then you glorify those cheat days as something you really enjoy. Almost.
Like I made a resolution one year, no Girl Scout cookies, and suddenly Thin Mints became the most delicious food on planet Earth. It was incredible. But your point about like the cheat days, that's actually another important lesson for us is when we're thinking about how we define our goals, it's actually really important to build in some slack. Some get out of jail free cards.
Okay,
Because
so
I
those
think
are okay.
those are good, actually, because I think what happens is as we're approaching January 1st and we have our aspirational selves in the driver's seat and we're like, we're going to kick ass in 2023. I got all my goals covered. We can be purists about our goals. It's like, I'm going to the gym every single day this year. And we all know that life happens and it's not actually possible to so purely execute on your goals. But when you build in what are called emergency reserves, so you say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym every day this month, except I'm giving myself 5 freebie days where, if you're a parent, right, where if my kid's sick, I have to be at home with them, or, maybe I'm just lazy one day and I just want a day off. That way, you can still feel that you can achieve your goal and you don't risk falling completely off the wagon, which is what we typically do when we create these really audacious goals where there's no wiggle room whatsoever. We have our first cheat day and we're like, all right, to hell with it. I'm done.
Yeah, it's like I want to go to the gym every month, like you said, and all of a sudden you've missed 2 days in a row, and it just feels like, well, what's the point?
What's the point? I'm not going to reach my goal anyway. And we know from research, I certainly have seen this in my own experience, that our goals are really tethered to our sense of self-identity. And so when you don't fulfill a goal, it's almost an indictment on who you are. It's like, wait a second, I thought that I was the kind of person who actually follows through on their goals. So it can be really discouraging when you do have those 2 cheat days or you do miss the gym 2 days to be like, darn it, this is kind of a threat to who I am or the kind of person that I want to be. And that's why building in those reserves can be really useful.
That makes a lot of sense. So building things that you want to do better than things that you don't want to do, but not necessarily, it's not always bad to say, like, for example, like staying off your phone, very popular one, or eating less sugar.
Yes.
Is it just like, is it coming up with like, well, instead of telling myself I want to be on my phone less, I'm going to almost trick myself with an activity that's more productive than being on my, like every time I have this desire to go on my phone, I'm going to do something else.
Yeah,
Is that better than...
The way that habits work, right, is that they're triggered by certain cues in our environment. And so what we want to do is associate whatever cue leads us to want to check our phone with something else. In fact, they've done research with people who are trying to quit smoking. And they find that a lot of the desire to smoke, I mean, of course, there's the physiological component, right? You're addicted to nicotine and you enjoy that experience, but is the habit of taking a break from work, going outside, being with your buddies, right? And so when they found a way to replace that particular smoking behavior with another behavior that still gives you that short break in the day, that still gives you that habit that feels nice and grounding and relaxing, they were much more likely to quit smoking. And so what we want to do is, or what I found really successful in my own life is to find substitute behaviors rather than saying, I don't want to do this thing, because then you're just sitting there being like, don't do the thing, don't do the thing, don't do the thing.
Yeah.
And that's really, really hard. But at the same time, why do we check Instagram? It's because like we're tired and we want a break and we want a distraction.
Yeah, it's just
and
like
so just find something else.
It's just a distraction, really. Yeah. It's just like something else to do and I want to check out or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, like some online behaviors I think are just better than others. So I have taken to texting my friends more, like checking in on old friends when I'm feeling that way. And it's just like, oh, I just want to take a break or I want to relax for a bit. I go and I'm like, oh, who do I want to reach out to that I've lost touch with? And that feels slightly more nourishing than scrolling, the discovery feed on Instagram, which is just endless.
It's interesting. Yeah. I'm trying to think about what habits I'm going to replace being on my phone with. Are there any specific habits that are better than others when you are trying to think of those types of replacement habits?
Yeah.
Like, are there ones that are more positive than others, or there are certain types of things that you want to look to do?
Social connection is key. And so I actually think, and this is why I was talking maybe about texting is like maybe not being that bad, because actually texting is a way of connecting with other people. It's a wonderful way of staving off loneliness and feeling like you do have a sense of community in this world and you do have people that you can commiserate with or share your feelings with. And so I think that the challenge with Instagram becomes when I, Maya, am in bed and I'm literally just passively scrolling through people's feeds. And there's nothing interactive about that. There's nothing that's actually forging connectedness between me and the other person, really. I mean, okay, sure, now I know the beautiful view they had in Hawaii when they were on their wonderful vacation, but I don't feel closer to the person. So I think any habits, whether it's calling a friend, like I started one of my New Year's resolutions this year is like handwrite more cards, like old school communication, right? So I have like a goal, I'm going to like send my friends letters, which I haven't done in so long, right? So you can just find other ways of expressing that desire for, again, relaxation or, just distraction.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone could read my pen.
So work on your handwriting could be one, Nick. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh, can I please get you like the old like Kumon packages with like the little letters? I'm gonna give
so funny,
Nick a
Allie.
handwriting course.
I'll never do it.
Okay.
The other really important thing we should think about when we're setting our goals is, and this touches back on the thing we were talking about before about our aspirational selves getting ahead of our real selves, is to try and define our goals when we're in the same physiological and psychological state as we'll be in when we're actually trying to execute on the goal. And so when it's 4 p.m. on a Sunday and Nick, you're like watching football, that's probably not a good time for you to be like, yep, I'm going to get up at 5:30 a.m. on every weekday and go to the gym. Because there's an empathy gap between your present moment self and your future self, right? And you're not empathizing what that future version of you is. So when you have gotten up at 5:30, let's say 3 days in a row, fine, I'm going to give you the rights to actually create that goal. But you really do want to approximate what your psychological and physical state is going to be like when you're in goal pursuit mode, because that makes it much more likely that you're actually going to achieve your goals.
Empathy gap.
Empathy gap.
What can we talk about? That sounded great. What is that? Just like is that a clinical term? Or
yeah, it's a term we use in behavioral science research. But basically, we put a huge premium on current day Maya, right? Like current moment Maya. I'm like, I really value Maya right now. And when I think about the future, I discount. In fact, this is well corroborated in the research. I really discount future Maya. Like, I'm less concerned with how she turns out. I'm less concerned with what pain she suffers, but I really care about not suffering right now. And so a lot of the biases we have in our mind lead us to act in ways or make decisions that privilege our present selves, right? This is why we might procrastinate. It's like, well, I really care right now that I don't suffer, but oh gosh, tomorrow, when I was in college, right? Maya's going to have to write that term paper that she refuses to write right now. And so part of making smarter goals, part of being smarter about our decision making is trying to actually envision what your future self is going to feel like, having been handed this, in this case, non-gift from former self.
It's also, I'm guessing, probably plays a role in why so many people, when they're having that break up or get back together fight, and then one person's promising to do better in the future or promising to change or making these wild claims of what they are willing to do in this relationship they're trying to save. But when they get to that future moment, it seems like such an unattainable goal.
That is so true and so well said. It's bringing me back to my wedding day. This is what happens guys, when you're married to a behavioral scientist, and from the perspective of my husband, in his vows, he was talking about things that he was committing to. But then at the end, he said, I promise to try and build the habits of mind that actually allow me to be this way. Very knowledgeable of the fact that, it's one thing to state that, okay, I promise I'm going to change. I promise I'm going to be X or Y way. But in the same way that you go to the gym and you do pull-ups and push-ups and bicep curls to build strength, you have to actually cultivate new patterns of thinking and new ways of thinking.
How would a behavioral scientist write their wedding vows? Because now that I'm thinking about it, like wedding vows are so about like you're thinking about your future self, of which you're not really empathizing with as much.
I would.
Is it safe to say that we never really fully empathize with our future selves as well as we're able to empathize with our current selves?
I think that's fair to say. In part because there's so much uncertainty too about what the future will bring, but more importantly, how we will change, right? We rarely think about that. We think about us as being stable entities that are operating in this dynamic world, but our own preferences can change, right? The things that we value can change. The way that we feel about ourselves can change. All of that is very hard to take into account in present day. But on that note about the wedding stuff, I think we had very pragmatic vows. I found them romantic because I felt like they were genuinely trying to ensure a long-term marriage, but I can imagine other people not. For example, Jimmy and I, Jimmy's my husband, we don't believe in unconditional love. Very much, right? Okay, so there are absolutely conditions on my willingness to love my husband and vice versa. If I were to change in some marked way where I suddenly was mean to him all the time, it doesn't matter that I am the same, quote, person. I'm not actually the same person because my behaviors have radically changed, and that should change, in fact, how he feels about me.
I've always argued, I think pragmatism is romantic. I think.
Oh, thanks, Nick. I feel better.
Well, because I think it's just more honest and real. And if you're willing to kind of face that realism and then still choose to find romance in that and build a romance, I think it's a lot more romantic because it's harder than just simply saying we're destined to fate, or I'll always feel this way, or I'll love you no matter what. It's just like, well, if you love me no matter what, then I don't really do anything.
I don't have to work hard.
I don't have to work hard. I don't have to hold myself accountable.
Totally.
I don't have to earn your love day in and day out. And I find that all to be very romantic, to have to earn that on a continued basis.
I still remember, this is so funny. You're really bringing me back to 2016. But I remember writing the last paragraph of my vows. And at one point I said, with a family and community like the one that's here today, I really feel that we can get through anything. And then I scratched that out. I was like, no, I don't. I don't actually think we could get through anything. And I changed it to, hopefully it'll help us beat the odds. And so again, it's all very pragmatic, but I think I've been, mindful of the ways that we
are going to be like this, Nick. I'm thinking about this. I'm like, you're going to be calling Maya and saying, okay, can you help me write these?
I think deep down, I'd probably want that, but I'm not going to be marrying a behavioral scientist. So I might.
You might want to be a little bit more.
I might gloss it up a little bit,
okay.
just for the sake of.
And again, there were sweet moments. It's just that, we were measured in the way that we committed to each other, because I think that's really
both, right. I feel like we should give more credit to that type of thought process, and I sincerely think it is more romantic than just saying kind of these profound things without anything really behind it, or plan of how we're going to make this work. Till death do us part.
Yeah, and when you don't think things are destined, then you really do have to work every day to be the best version of yourself, to try to earn the respect and love and compassion of the people that you surround yourself with, not just in your romantic relationships, but in any relationship, right? You need to feel like you're at least aspiring to be a good version of yourself versus taking for granted, because especially with the people we're closest to, right? We can take them for granted. So early on in my relationship with Jimmy, we talked about the fact that it was going to be very easy for us to desensitize to our good fortune and having met each other, because that's just how humans are. We just get used to good things. We also get used to bad things, but a lot slower than we get used to good things. We desensitize to good fortune effortlessly. And so we implemented at the beginning of our relationship a gratitude exercise where at the end of every day, we just shared a moment that we were so happy to have shared with the other person or something that we really liked or loved about the other person because we wanted to stave off that desensitization process, I guess, and make it so that we were constantly reminded of our luck.
So when you say desensitize to good things, are you talking about like flying first class and then having an almost like getting used to that good thing so quickly?
Yeah, I think when we have a good thing happen to us or something good happens in our lives, I feel like what happens is it so easily becomes the new status quo.
Yeah.
It becomes business as usual.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the first time I ever flew on a business class flight, this was for a work trip, I was like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Right? Especially if work is paying for it. You know, it's just a little less exciting than it was like the first few times, right? Because that's just how we work. We habituate, right? We become used to the norm. And that's why they say actually in behavioral science research that when it comes to day-to-day happiness, we're much more affected by, say, the length of our commute, which we know actively makes people unhappy, than we are by how beautiful the interior of our home is. So it's much smarter to get a slightly less nice place that's closer to your workplace where you could actually walk to work every day than it is to have a beautiful mansion somewhere and have a 45-minute commute in LA traffic in order to get to your job. Because those are the things we don't habituate to. But we do habituate to the nice house. We habituate to the nice thing that just becomes normal.
But even just like I'm thinking relationships too. Like I love that gratitude exercise because that idea of, I think that's where a lot of people struggle after like the honeymoon phase is this expectation of how their relationship is supposed to feel without really having to do any of the work because it was so exciting and great. And and that becomes the standard of how it should be without the effort, so to speak.
Yeah. And you know, I wonder, I'm just thinking in this moment whether I benefited from growing up in a family where my parents did have an arranged marriage. So I'm of Indian descent, and my parents, you know, they were given a choice, but they met on January 1st. And then they got married on January 21st. So they were asked to decide whether or not they wanted to get engaged on the very day they met. And then they got married 20 days later.
What a choice. We'll let you choose.
Yeah. But they
decide
do,
today.
You know, a lot of people, though, they show up to the altar. There's no choice, right? So it is important to differentiate that they had a choice in the matter. But they got married, and the whole approach to marriage is so different when you're coming from that kind of tradition, right? And I think it's like sobering. I don't know. You just grow up with a very realistic understanding of what's involved in two people living in harmony over the course of their lives. And so I just wonder whether that maybe has affected me.
I mean, because I've heard this a lot that arranged marriages have a surprisingly good track record.
Yeah, I think it's about expectations.
Yeah.
I don't think it's about the nature of the relationship. I think it's about the expectations we go into that union with, right? Am I expecting fireworks every day for the first 10 years? And then do I have a midlife crisis when all of a sudden the fireworks go away? Or do I anticipate that this is a love I'm actually trying to cultivate and build with my partner? Now, again, in my case, I was really lucky. I fell in love with my husband. He fell in love with me. And so we had that as like we were almost at a better starting point, let's say. But yeah, I do think that kind of daily intentionality when it comes to relationships is really helpful.
Empathy gap.
Empathy gap.
I really like that.
Yeah. I was wondering if, from a behavioral science standpoint, like how you might be able to categorize behavior and know whether it falls into the category of, okay, this is just the fireworks dying down. It's not as glamorous as it was at the beginning, but we can ultimately navigate and overcome this versus behavior that might be indicative of a more fundamental change in someone.
I think at the end of the day, patience is really helpful when you're first running up against some of those feelings like, oh, the fireworks, or we're fighting a little bit more. I think it's easy to just want to jump ship, at least in your mind. You start checking out because you're freaked out, right? You're like, oh my gosh, this is really alarming because I love this person. I loved this person. And now suddenly the dynamic feels totally off. And because our behaviors and our moods and the way that we feel about others can be so influenced by our environments, our hormonal states, right? Depending on, where someone is in the course of even a day and how their hormones are operating can affect the way that you feel about others. If you go on The Bachelor and you're denied all access to the outside world, it can definitely amp up how much you think you like other people. I think it's really helpful to allow more time to pass where you're in a more diverse set of environments. You have a more diverse set of mood states, and you really pressure test whether there's an underlying, fundamental problem, or whether this is actually something that is more like a current, right, that can pass. And I don't want to discourage people from leaving, truly toxic or harmful relationships, right? We tend to have a bias towards the status quo, towards quitting in general, and certainly quitting relationships is something that's really hard for us, in part because we don't really think about the opportunity costs of the fact we're in a relationship and that we could actually be dating someone else. We could actually be spending that time doing something else. And so there's a huge body of literature. There's actually an episode on my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, called The Science of Quitting. It is the most popular episode we've ever had. And she talks about it in the context of relationships. She talks about it in the context of lots of parts of life where there's so much virtue in like grit and perseverance and staying the course and being able to say, I've been married for 40 years. But there's a lot of virtue in actually choosing to exit a relationship and choosing to quit something, right? And so it's important that there's a balance there, right? I'm certainly not advocating for people staying in a relationship that's unhealthy. And that's why Amanda's question is so good.
I told a sibling he's going through, he has a big decision to make in his career. Mm-hmm. And it's a decision that could affect him for a very long time, just based on the career he has. And I was talking to him and I just said, if your reason to stay in this current situation rather than explore a different opportunity, if on your top 3 reasons is how much you've already invested or how much work you've done or how much time has passed in this current situation, if that's on your top 2 or 3, that's a huge red flag.
See, Nick, the behavioral scientist, right? That's what we call sunk cost.
So I got that right?
Yeah, that's what we call sunk cost fallacy, right? So we really overweight the prior investments we've made in something, even though at the end of the day, really, do I want to torture myself for 5 more years just because I was already in a relationship for 4 years? Or do I want to wipe the slate clean potentially and find a healthier relationship?
Behavioral, like, what's the science behind why we do that? Like, why are we so willing to have the perspective of a new and exciting opportunity? Why are we so prone to like hang on to something, even if it was a struggle, even if we wake up every day and I was like, do I really want to show up to this place, or do I even like the people? Or if I'm in a relationship, it's like, I'm tired of fighting. Why can't we just wipe the slate clean and just say, I've learned so much from all these ups and downs, and now I'm set up for such much more success. But we are so that's not our norm.
Yes.
Like if you are that person who can do that, you've had to really teach yourself to have that perspective, and then remind yourself when presented with a situation, be like, oh yes, you're right, I need to not do that. Like, what's the science behind why our brains work that way?
Yes, there's at least 2 reasons why we're like that. The first is that we like to think that we're good decision makers. It's a huge part of our identity to feel like we made good choices in the past and present. And so when we're admitting to ourselves that we may have chosen the wrong spouse, that maybe we went against our friend's advice or our parents' advice or whatever it was, that's a big blow to the ego, right? Yeah. You can feel pretty defeated by that. But what I want to remind people of is that you may very well have made a great decision at that time, given the information you had and given how things were. People change over time, and we don't account for that when it comes to our egos and decision making, right? You might support a politician, let's say, and then 3 years later, they do something really stupid, right? Yeah. You didn't know they were going to do the really stupid thing, so you were totally rational. You were a good decision maker in supporting that person, right? Or admiring an actor or whatever it is, right? And so one antagonist for whatever shame you might feel in having made a bad decision is, don't forget, you changed and your partner changed in some way, or the world changed some way,
or
your boss changed, like anyone changed. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily an indictment. Now, maybe you did make a shitty decision, in which case you should just learn from that experience, but it could also very well be the case that you didn't make a shitty decision. You actually made a great decision based on, again, the information you had at the time. The second reason is that when we pour a lot of effort and energy into something, when we invest a lot in something, it signals to our brain that we really care about that thing and that thing is valuable. In this case, it might be a relationship, it might be a job that you have, it might be, I don't know, the bounty of things that we care about in our lives. And so it's really hard in a moment to say, oh, this thing that I really care about, no, I'm not doing it anymore. Oh, I'm out, right? That's hard for our brains to reckon with because it breeds a lot of cognitive dissonance to feel like this thing you poured so much energy and effort into was for naught.
Yeah. If only we could take that mindset and apply it to like goal settings when we're trying to have new behaviors.
If only, right? I mean, if you just had,
and some of we're so willing to like stubbornly stay in things, and then we're also so reluctant to like try to change, new behaviors. But that if we could take that stubbornness and apply it to things that, even things we say we want to do but haven't done yet.
Yeah. And I should also say, I should caveat that the research is complex, right? So there's never going to be a one size fits all. This is what Nick should do every single day. This is what Amanda should do every day. Allie, this is your recipe. Instead, we have to be experimental. But what I've tried to do on my show is, and Nick, you know this, but it's part storytelling of people's personal life stories about change, and then part science. So if people scroll through the feed of A Slight Change of Plans, any episode that starts with the science of will be a deep dive into that topic. So we have an episode, for example, on the science of regret and all the mistakes we make about how we think about regret and how we can reframe our relationship with regret so it's more positive. We have an episode called The Science of Loneliness, where we talk about all the things that can make us lonely and the health threats that loneliness can have and what we can do about that. We have episodes on the science of motivation, the science of behavior change, the science of mindset change. And if you listen to those, you'll get a deeper dive on each of the things that I'm talking about so that you can actually try and prescribe for yourself a different set of plans depending on what it is you're trying to achieve.
I'm curious if, I think one New Year's resolution that a friend had and that I've noticed with a lot of people who I'm close to is integrating more creativity into their lives, particularly because I come from a background with a lot of people who might have like done improv in college and then don't get to do it anymore, who played the instrument every single day and then with the rigors of work sort of fell off the wagon. And I'm curious if you have any insight into specific with like creative endeavors and tapping back into the more like artistic side of oneself, how someone can go about like reintegrating that back into life.
Oh, I think that's so lovely. And I haven't heard someone commit to that. And I think that's such a wonderful goal. I would make it concrete and tactical because that's the important part of the translation problem we sometimes face, which is I'm going to be more creative. Let me be creative by scrolling Instagram, right? So you have to make sure you're mapping it to a concrete set of goals. But I will say in my personal life, when I was a child, I was a concert violinist. I was an aspiring concert violinist. I studied at the Juilliard School in New York, and I was on the speed train to hopefully becoming a professional violinist in my future. And then a tendon tear ended my career overnight. It was a complicated medical saga that ensued from there. And then I became a scientist, right? I got my PhD in cognitive science, behavioral science, which was a completely different sphere than being in the arts. And I really craved stimulation in that part of my brain, right? I mean, obviously there's creativity when it comes to science, but it felt so different from the kind of creativity I was using as a musician. And it was only 2 years ago, actually, when I started A Slight Change of Plans that I feel like I've been able to tap back into that kind of artistic creativity again. Because first of all, I picked up my violin again after decades and I played some of the soundtrack for some of the show, which was really fun.
Oh, really?
But more importantly, Nick, you and I were talking about this before we started recording, and being an executive producer of the show and actually thinking about the story structure of the show, it's a kind of creativity that I didn't get to use before. And it is so satisfying. Like it nourishes me in a way that I've not been able to nourish myself through the lens of being a scientist. And so, yeah, you just filled me with delight actually in sharing that, because I think that's such a wonderful resolution for people to have.
I feel that way with like, I wanted to be a cartoonist when I was a kid, and then got into business school, and then coming out to LA and doing all this stuff. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just like I felt like I started tapping into the creative things I was good at or liked that I just dropped for like 15 years.
Yeah.
So it's
always possible to reclaim, because I think I really believed, I'm 37 now. So I remember believing, okay, my time in the artistic sun is over, right? Like what was I possibly going to discover midlife, right? Or I don't know if it's midlife yet. Gosh, Maya, don't age yourself unnecessarily. But you know what I mean? It's hard to think that somehow like artistic things will fall from the sky, but it's truly been like the greatest blessing in my adult life to have discovered this podcast and to be able to have this artistic outlet.
On the flip side of that though,
yeah,
with goal setting,
yes,
I feel like sometimes, using Amanda's example, I think there's a lot of people who have a genuine goal, or maybe had a creative interest, got away from it, and want to do that. But then I think there's other goals that maybe we like the idea of it more than we actually like it. It's like, oh, I want to paint more because like the thought of me being a painter sounds cool, or
Totally.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
And then we
want to have that identity, but we don't actually enjoy the day to day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we stop ourselves from falling trap to setting goals that maybe even deep down we don't really have a passion for, but we like the idea of us accomplishing that goal?
Yeah, I was reading a behavior change book the other day, and it was talking about how important it is to tolerate boredom when it comes to pursuits. So we think a lot about like, you have to get motivated and amped up if you want to achieve this goal. But actually, a large part of what it takes to become, say, an endurance athlete or an amazing singer-songwriter is just doing that gritty practice all day, every day.
The rule of 10,000
right?
hours kind of thing.
And yeah, though, I mean, I know Malcolm Gladwell runs the production company where I create a slight change of plans, but the 10,000 hour rule is up for debate. But deliberate practice is very important, very intentional, focused practice. And so what I've realized is that grit does not transfer across domains. At least it hasn't in my life. So when I was a violinist, I was gritty as all hell. I mean, I would be like a 12-year-old in a practice room for hours. Like I would practice 5 hours a day in the summer. When I got to my postdoc and I was studying cognitive neuroscience and I was putting people in brain scanners, like could not do it, did not have grit, like hated it, wanted out from my windowless lab. And then with podcasting, again, I find that I'm willing to do a lot of the boring, gritty stuff because I love it enough.
Sure.
So you have to pressure test these goals you have to make sure that you're willing to tolerate the boredom. That's going to constitute a sizable part of the goal pursuit. And of course, you can enjoy the 20% joy of like it being a cool thing to do. Being a painter is like a cool thing to say to people do, but are you willing to learn all that painstaking technique in order to become the great painter? You need to test it out and see if you have it in you.
Yeah, or all the little things that go into, becoming a painter or getting the equipment or all the behind the scenes,
like I remember,
so to speak.
Watching some interview with Taylor Swift from a long time ago where she was basically saying like, that I'm like I don't know what the exact interview was, but it was something along the lines of like, that I'm like at least 70% businesswoman day to day. Like the actual job that I have day to day is not actually being a singer-songwriter. It's like running a business for myself. Yeah. And I think that's true for, almost everything that anyone has ever been good at has involved a lot of very unglamorous work behind the scenes. And 100%. So you just have to be willing to take that on.
Yeah. And I think on some level you have to maybe not enjoy every day to day, but you enjoy it because what it's accomplishing, like what it's behind. You mentioned the podcasting. I feel the same way about this show. Like there's a lot of things about making the show. It's like,
exactly.
But I always enjoy it because of why, like what it's accomplishing and what it's working towards.
It reminds me of those like very cheesy motivational posters and like the iceberg one where it's like what people see versus what people doesn't see, and like majority's under the water so they don't know like what goes into it. But yeah.
I think that's right. I also think though, so Nick, you described something where we want to commit to a goal like painting, let's say, because it sounds really cool, but we actually don't really want to be a painter. I want to also make sure though that people's self-identities don't hold them back from pursuing new things. Because I think sometimes we have a very strong identity and we don't want to take the risk of exploring new terrain. We're worried we might fail.
Which I think is a very popular topic on this show of people calling in. There's, you get to that point in life, it's kind of like right around 25, 30. I think it's like between 25 and 35 where you spent most of your early 20s or whatever, like living up to the expectations you set as a teenager, your parents. And then you kind of figure out a lot of people like, I don't like what I do, or it's fine, but these other dreams they set aside, maybe it's people because they had, kids early on and now they're at a place where they have a little more freedom, or maybe they got out of a relationship. There's all these things that they make them want to try new things, but they feel very reluctant to do for a variety of different reasons. And there's just a lot of fear of trying that new thing.
Absolutely. I think we need to see our identities, our self-identities, as these malleable, dynamic constructs. We tend to have a fixed sense of self. In my own life, I was mentioning to you, right? I'm like the 15-year-old who's dreaming to be a concert violinist, and then overnight my career ends. And so a malleable identity in many ways was forced upon me, right?
Mhm.
And I had to feel like, oh crap, what do I do next? And I wonder if this is helpful for people who are going through a change, an unwanted change, let's say, and they're trying to figure out how to maintain a stable identity throughout. Because I think one thing that throws us off in the face of change is that it can threaten our sense of self-identity, right? Or can push us beyond the limits of what we feel comfortable, the identity space we feel comfortable occupying. And that is, instead of attaching my identity to any given pursuit, like the violin, or you can imagine like being a teacher or being a podcaster, I have tried to attach my identity to the particular traits and features that underlie that pursuit that really make me tick. And so when I think about my time as a violinist, the stuff that really lit me up was the idea that I could emotionally connect with people, right? I could forge this incredible emotional connection with strangers as a kid, right? You go on stage, you're playing in front of thousands of strangers, and you could potentially make them feel something they've never felt before. And then when the violin when it left my life, right, against my will, I could then have a through line. I could say, okay, the violin's gone. And by the way, this took me a long time to figure out. So it's not like I was having these thoughts as a 15-year-old. This was like 30s thoughts. But I'm hoping other people can fast track their Maya process and hopefully get there faster. But when I realized, oh, it's human connection that makes me tick, I was able to then find that in other pursuits, even though the violin was no longer available to me. So when I think about the work that I did in the White House, it was all of it was actually about understanding the human mind and, what policies and programs could better help people who are leaving prison or who are coming back from war or, varied psychological states. And then with my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, like this is again me and my human connection element, right? So it's a completely different sphere than music, and it's totally different medium. Everything's different, but that underlying seed of a desire to understand how people work, to understand what makes them tick, to understand what motivates them and drives them, and how they heal from trauma and pain and sorrow, whatever it is, that's still present in my day-to-day work. So I would urge people who are listening, who are going through a change or want to inspire change in their lives, try to figure out, okay, what's that through line? What's the one thing about yourself that you're really passionate about that you can hold constant, even when the manifestation of that thing is different?
If someone has a partner who's trying to make a change, is there anything that you can speak to in terms of the way that you can support someone who's going through that identity and soul searching? Because it seems so personal and intimate. And yet I think as someone who's very impacted by a partner's identity and also who has this unique vantage point in being able to potentially help, I'm curious how you think folks might be able to navigate that.
Yeah, it's again, such a great question. I would say, try to leverage the power of what's called a fresh start. So there's this thing called the fresh start effect in behavioral science. And it basically says we are much more likely to commit to new goals, to commit to new ways of being, new ways of behaving at these departures from the past, at fresh starts. So this could be the New Year's, right? So again, I used to not even set resolutions, but I realized I was missing out on the opportunity to capitalize on a fresh start, which is New Year's Day. It could be when you move from one city to the next. I mean, Nick, you were talking about moving to LA, and then maybe that emboldened you to start anew. And I was listening to your episode with Susie, and Susie's going to be moving to LA, and she might introduce a whole new way of life, right? And so
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
What these big changes, these what can be earth-shattering changes, right? Moving to a new place, getting married, having children, upending your life in any way. What it can do is it can break you free from old patterns of behavior, old habits of mind, even old physical structures that influence your day-to-day. So, every day on your walk home, you pass by the burrito shop, let's say, and now the burrito shop's not there. Okay, time to introduce a new habit. But in even a deeper way, which is, okay, I have this sense of self-identity, but in some small way, I'm wiping the slate clean when I depart from my past and I try to become this new person. And that's when our brains are especially ripe for behavior change, for mindset change. So if you have a partner who's really striving to make a change and you want to be supportive, encourage them to think about upcoming fresh starts that they can use to try to give themselves a kick, a step up when it comes to motivation.
Is there ever a time where you could set a goal for a partner? Or do they have to come up with it for themselves?
Yeah, there is research showing that we're much better at achieving our goals and we're much more motivated when we set our own goals.
Sure.
And granted, a lot of us don't have that freedom, right? I mean, Nick, you basically work for yourself. So like lucky you actually do get to set your goals. But a lot of us have employers and we're told what we have to do, or, we're struggling because, there is some fixedness in our environment. But we can always try to find entry points, even within that structure, for us to assert agency and control. So let's say you work out with a personal trainer, right? Or you have a fitness coach of some kind. That's great. I'm encouraging you to have the trainer who prescribes a great routine for you every day, but have them give you some options. So in any given workout, it can be like, okay, today you get to choose, like you're going, hardcore on squats or deadlifts or whatever the option set is, right? And just giving people the ability to choose from among options makes them feel like they're in the driver's seat. They feel more ownership over their goals, and they're much more likely to actually complete them. So wherever possible, you want to make sure that people are articulating goals for themselves.
What about a couple that's been together for a long period of time and they want to, the mutual goal of the couple, who they're creatures of habit even, but they want to find that spark, or they want to introduce chemistry, or they want to improve their sex life, whatever it is that, the goal is to like get away from like the staleness of the relationship.
Yeah.
But they are together. They don't feel like they're doing anything new. How could you recommend like new behaviors that might entice them to make it easier to accomplish this goal of
like that freshness?
That freshness, or going out of the way to, these, date night ideas or whatever it is. What's that mindset that would be beneficial to keep them on track?
So I think what sabotages us in situations like this is that we feel that it needs to be an escape to Europe or bust, right? And again, not everyone like Greg and Victoria get to go.
Get to go to Europe. To Europe quite a bit.
They went quite often.
Were they in Rome or something? I can't remember what city they were in.
London and Paris.
Okay,
for holidays,
so some people among us get to do really fancy pants things, but for the rest of us, it's like, okay, we've got our jobs and we have like, let's say, a dog at home, and then we're limited in our ability to do that. Really small, novel experiences can go a long way. And I mean going out for a movie night, going to a restaurant you've never been to, taking a different walking path on your, say, evening walk, engaging in activity together, right? Like, okay, I'm not into pottery. I don't even like painting. We're just going to do this like 1-hour painting class together. As long as there's novelty, it helps break us from, again, any patterns that we have in our day-to-day relationships. And it also helps see new aspects of the person that we're with, right? So I might see a part of my husband emerge in a pottery class that, and this guy does not like pottery, by the way, like he's not super into artsy stuff, but there might be some aspect of his personality that I've never tapped into because we've never been in an environment like that. So I almost feel like the smaller the budget, the better, because then it's a more sustainable commitment where you're carving out a small amount of time. And again, you just need some novelty. And during COVID, we had to get really creative with novelty, right? Because we were all locked in our homes. But you find ways to introduce that kind of, those fresh new experiences. And ideally, you're finding things that both of you have never experienced before.
I was going to ask that. I was like, does it need to be both of you?
Or something that one of you is really, really passionate about and the other person has never found a passion for. And you just say, look, just give me the treat tonight of me exposing you to my world. Like, I know you don't get it. I know you don't appreciate, let's say, I don't know, classical music or hiking or scuba diving or whatever the thing is, but just like give me my one shot. And you can find, there's going to be a lot of bonding through that experience because at a minimum, the person will learn why you love it, Allie, right? Like why you get so excited about it. And that brings people together.
Yeah.
Yeah. The newness of things really, I mean, well, I was going to ask you, Nally and I are both creatures of habit, which in a lot of ways we love in the sense that thankfully we like a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
And we're able to do that over and over. I'm curious about like creatures of habit and like the pros and cons to that type of behavior. But like the other night I was like on TikTok and I've been like big on food TikTok lately. And so finally I was like, I need to try, I like to cook. I need to start trying these. And I made this new chicken dish. It was delightful. And just the fact that like, it was a new thing we both liked and we introduced it into our like food rotation, both like gave us a sense of like wonder and excitement. It's like, ooh, something new we're going to eat on a regular basis. That because before it was like we'll make fun of ourselves because like what do we want for dinner, and then we kind of always go back to our or the same 5 or 6 options, and just knowing that we have something new
New. Yeah.
was exciting and enjoyable. And that alone like made that night like exciting.
Exactly.
You know?
You're almost building your repertoire of
Yeah.
things that you can pull from.
And it's kind of crazy,
Yeah.
just that little thing. But I am curious about, as a creature of habit.
Yeah, I'm also a creature of habit, by
Yeah.
the way. And
Okay.
so I really relate to you. And it is so easy for us to just revert to our normal day-to-day habits. But I mean, I'm just thinking about one experience I had recently where my husband plays competitive squash. So he'll like travel for, sorry, not as his profession, just as he's an amateur competitive squash player. So he travels for tournaments. He's so passionate about playing squash. This is like, when we signed our marriage contract, it was like, I knew number 1 was squash and number 2 was going to be me. Like that was well established. And so I don't know how, I don't play racket sports. I've never been good at this stuff. I've occasionally gone to a squash court with him and like tried, and I've sucked at it. But we were at a birthday party a couple weeks ago and they were playing pickleball. And like pickleball is like easier for someone who's never played a racket sport to actually like try to do. And Jimmy was stunned because I was like, yeah, I want to try playing pickleball. And this was the sort of thing I think a couple years ago I would never have been eager to try. I would just been like, whatever, that's not going to be a part of my long-term future. And again, I'm a creature of habit, so I'm going to stand by the food and eat my food. And that's where my passion lies. But it was such a fun experience for us to play on the same team. Jimmy was really excited by the idea. Maybe this was something we could actually do as a couple in the future, right? And I'm so grateful that this is such a small thing, right? So I'm not talking about the Elizabeth Gilbert, like eat, pray, love, travel around the world type of novelty. I'm literally talking about going to a birthday party and like maybe they're playing badminton or maybe they're playing charades or whatever it is and just participating in those activities.
Yeah.
It's a memory for us in the same way that cooking that chicken dish.
Yeah.
It's not a huge deal.
No, it wasn't
That
a
you and
huge deal. It
Natalie
was like,
view that as a really sweet
something
memory
new.
you had. Yeah.
And especially when it comes to being in a relationship and there's just a lot of redundancy and familiarity and doing the same things over and over, which are valuable, because there's consistency and you know what to expect, but it is nice to just mix it up, you know?
Yes, exactly. And I think, in part, this new, what I'll call zest for life, like an eagerness to try new experiences emerged from, so I was mentioning that one of the interviews I did on A Slight Change of Plans was around regret. And like regret is this like icky stomach churning feeling that we hate feeling. I mean, we try to stave off feelings of regret all the time. I mean, how many times day to day are we making decisions because we think to ourselves, oh, I'm going to regret if I don't do this thing, right? So it's a very, very powerful force. And what the research shows is that when we're in our 20s and 30s, we tend to equally regret things that we have done as we do things that we have not done, right? So those are in like equal proportions. But after we turn 50 and we look back on our lives, we are far more likely to regret the things we did not do than the things that we did do. And that's an interesting turning point if you're trying to, again, bridge that empathy gap between you and your future self. If you want to try to minimize the regret that 50-year-old Nick experiences, you just want to do more things. Because chances are you're not really going to regret having done the thing. You will regret not having done the thing.
Yeah, I don't know where that comes from. I think it's, for me, I feel fortunate to have bridged that empathy gap. And I think it's because I've experienced what for me was a lot of disappointment or sadness or, and a lot of that was this heartbreak at the time. But like until I was able to experience and have moments in my life where I at least felt like I was at rock bottom, whether I actually was or not, but just my perspective was like rock bottom and I overcame it. Like that allowed me to recognize that failure isn't that big of a deal, or disappointment is fine, or rejection or regret, and then that's, it's like when people ask about regrets, it's like, well, sure. I mean, yeah, I can nitpick choices I've made that didn't work out the way I hoped, but now I've learned from them. So that's when you have that kind of no regrets kind of mentality, but there's a lot of truth to that because you just have the perspective of recognizing, like you would just rather be that, it's like, it's me knowing that I'm going to be 50 and 60 and 70 and I want to look back and be proud of the things I said yes to more than disappointed in the things I didn't try. And I think it's having felt that failure at times and it's like a chicken before the egg, because until you actually try and fail, you won't have that confidence or that lesson to know that you should try more things even after you failed.
Yeah,
it's like failing gave me the confidence to fail more.
Yes. Yes, I so resonate with that. And that's certainly been the case in my life. And it's exactly as you said. I mean, regret teaches us what we care about. We don't regret things if we don't care about those things, right? Or if we don't care if we didn't have certain values, right? We didn't privilege certain things. If we didn't have certain dreams or goals, we wouldn't have regrets. And so regret can actually be a really instructive emotion. It's not one necessarily we should run away from. If we do the hard work, like it seems like you've done, Nick, where you sit in your regret for a bit and you realize, okay, first of all, this is not as scary as I thought. I'm not as concerned as, I thought I would be. But two, I can learn something from this that can help me make better decisions in the future. It can actually be a good friend of yours. Like regret can be a very helpful advisor as you live your life.
Yeah. I like that. A good friend. Regret is your friend, or can be.
Can be, yeah.
This has been all great. Before we get to texting office hours, what's just any final thoughts around new habits, new behaviors as for people who want to obtain some of these new goals for the new year?
Okay, so there's one that I learned from a friend of mine, Katie Milkman. She's a professor of behavioral science, and it's called temptation bundling. And all this requires is pairing an undesirable activity with a desirable activity. So folding laundry would be an undesirable activity, or for some people, working out would be undesirable, or, walking in the morning would be undesirable. You want to pair it with something that you find immediately rewarding. So that might be your favorite Netflix show. That might be a podcast that you're really excited to listen to. And you need to save this content for only those times where you're doing the undesirable activity. So you have to deny yourself the pleasure of listening to your favorite pop song, your favorite podcast, your favorite TV show outside of the environment in which you're working towards that specific goal. And this has been a game changer for me. Like I will save my favorite. So I saved the Greg Victoria episode for like a really hard workout that I was doing because I wanted to be really immersed in something else while I was doing this really hard strength training workout. So I actually saved it. I remember I saved it for that Saturday, and I tried to avoid any spoilers in advance. So I literally in my podcast feed, in my Netflix feed. So the thing recently, I just finished watching. Is it Harry and Meghan or Meghan and Harry? Harry and Meghan, right? The documentary. It's only when you're doing incline treadmill can you watch this show.
Yeah,
just
I did the exact same thing.
And I looked forward.
My 12-3-30 with Harry and Meghan. Yeah.
I looked forward to getting on the treadmill because I was
with Below Deck.
Yeah, I need to know what happens to Meghan. I need to know what happens to Meghan. But again, the only way this works is if you don't allow yourself to watch Harry and Meghan when you're not on the treadmill. Otherwise, it's just, it's available to you all the time, right? Yeah. And so again, this leads to kind of bizarre behavior sometimes because my husband and I will discover an album we really love. I remember Golden Hour by Casey Musgraves, one of my favorite albums. And he was like, let's play it while we cook dinner. And I was like, nope, that's actually a workout album. Can't listen to it right now. So you have to be strict, but it really the temptation bundling really helps, and you end up looking forward.
Yourself too. Yeah.
Because the reality is that the things that are undesirable, those are often activities that only have a long-term reward. So you're helping future you. And we already talked about the empathy gap we have between present us and future us. We know future us is going to be healthier if we do X. We know that future us is going to be more socially satisfied if we do, if we have coffee with a friend versus scrolling Instagram. We know all these things rationally, but they only deliver a reward typically down the line, right? Immediately, we don't often feel a great reward.
So you have to find a new reward.
So you need to find a reward to accompany that experience so that you associate that particular habit with something good.
That's great. All right, it's time for texting office hours. And if we have time after texting office hours, I want your 30-second thoughts on the Harry and Meghan doc and your thoughts on Zach as the new Bachelor, being the Bachelor fan that you are.
Yeah.
All right, let's bring him on. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. What's your name?
My name is Taylor, and I'm 25.
How can we help, Taylor?
So over the last couple weeks, right before heading home for the holidays, I matched with a boy on Hinge that I was excited about, saw him at my gym, and just kind of hit it off very quickly, moved to texting very fast and kind of just very much hit it off. The fact that I have a dog did not come up in conversation, even though it is in my Hinge profile, till maybe about a couple days. And so we started talking about my dog, and his initial response was, I am very allergic to dogs. And to me, that is a very initial deep deal breaker, but I don't know how to let him down pretty easily. very easily, as well as kind of continue the confidence that I just gained in going back into the dating scene after kind of just that initial boy of just like that I got excited about and want to continue to put myself out there and date.
So is he aware that you have a dog?
He's very aware I have a dog and sent him a picture of just like, oh yeah, this is my dog Bailey. And his initial right away, he said, I'm very allergic to dogs. I was just at my aunt's house and my throat almost closed up because of these dogs.
Wow. What kind of dog do you have?
Yeah. I have a golden retriever.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of hair floating around this apartment.
Yeah. And where did it go from here? Like did it just end?
No. So he started to just be like, oh, how clean are you? My cousin has air purifiers and vacuums all the time. And I've been at her apartment and I have had no issues. So it kind of went of him getting a little bit presumptuous of after not even just been texting of just like, oh, if this continues on, here's the steps that you need to take.
So you haven't even gone on a date with this guy?
Haven't even gone on a date yet.
Okay. And but you like him, or you
I
like what you
him.
know so
I was
far?
excited about like going on a date. First date I've been on in 2 years since moving to my new city, and I was just kind of excited about it, and until he told me about the dog thing.
So, and now you're a little annoyed by his follow up, basically.
I guess I'm a little like that's a little too soon to like. I guess I'm a little confused about where to go next. I guess maybe I don't need to let him down, but it's just like, I don't know if I should go on a date and just kind of put myself back out there and just like do the date thing, but I don't want to lead him on.
Well, how would you be? He knows you have a dog.
Right.
So you're not leading him on in that department. And neither of you know how you're going to feel about each other on a date. And he doesn't know how. I mean, I'm allergic to dogs. I'm allergic to some dogs more than I have found that I'm severely allergic to some dogs versus others. Mm-hmm. He might be the same, Mm-hmm. So there is that.
Yeah, he did say Goldens are very much set off as allergies.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like.
So where did the conversation go after he was asking you about your cleanliness?
I was just like, yeah, I'm very clean. I have a dog with a lot of hair, kind of keep up with it, could be better. And then it just kind of kept on moving into the getting to know each other. So but he keeps on bringing up like, I want to meet your dog. Like he's actively wanting to meet my dog and like get to know me, which is great. But it's just like, I get nervous of him coming over because I have other friends that are allergic to dogs and I just don't bring her around them. And they've been over with her not even in the apartment and they just get their allergies flare up. So I just don't know where to go,
I would not go on that first date.
You wouldn't?
No.
You should just shut it down.
Feels like the cards are stacked against you guys because, well, one, I mean, if this were to become a long-term relationship, you can't travel with air purifiers around you all the time, and you shouldn't have that pressure of maintain. I don't know what it would mean to maintain a level of cleanliness with a golden retriever that would keep this person safe, right? And so,
and that's what I was thinking too. Of like, it seems like he was putting a lot of pressure on me to keep my apartment clean.
Mm-hmm. And it just seems like it's reasonable for you to prioritize your dog over this person you've never met before.
I mean, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm as the exhibitionist in me would say, I think you could go on the date as long as you have just reasonable expectations. You have a lot more information now than you did before with this is a potentially big problem. But there's also nothing wrong with like, if someone you kind of identified as someone who's kind of newly back in the dating scene.
Mm-hmm. So that's true. If she's not looking for it, that's a good point.
I think you both need to maybe chill out a little bit. Both of you, like if you haven't met, so you guys kind of asking some of these more specific questions, it's just like you still don't really know if you're going to enjoy each other's company. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of trying to figure out. You guys are talking like, fuck, we fell in love and now we don't know what to do, but you have this dog, and that's the kind of energy you're bringing to this. And I think maybe you both need to like be excited that you met someone online that you have some sort of connection with, but just know there's just a lot more to learn.
But I just want to remind, like, there are a lot of people out there who really love dogs and aren't allergic to dogs.
Yeah.
And I guess it really depends on the intensity of your feelings for this person. I didn't get the sense that they were like in love with each other. I just got the sense they were excited, right? And so you could potentially
like they like each other's profiles.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. So I just wonder if there are other people whose profiles you would like that, where you're again, at least there's the potential of.
What's interesting is I'm actually thinking more about what I would say to him if he was calling in, like the other side, because it would be like, hey, as someone who's allergic to dogs, like just know that like this is something you're going to have to deal with. Like you're going to have to figure out ways to deal with it, not so much the people you date. You know, you're going to have to hope that the people you fall in love with or meet will be like amenable to like working with you a little bit, but like maybe just get to know her faster before you start asking her about, you know, like her hygiene or things like that.
I don't think it's, I don't know. I'm in the perspective where I can understand it seems a little pushy for you and like, oh, he's trying to force me to do stuff. I'm wondering if in his mind, he's trying to just create a solution or like he's so excited by you that he's like, oh, but like, here are the solutions that have worked for my friends. So all is like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think he's trying to say like, get a cleaner. Like,
as far as like his pushiness rubbing you the wrong way, I think to Allie's point, it's like kind of coming with good intentions. He's just like trying to like not die, you know?
Totally.
Like,
yeah, which is totally fair.
You know, but he's asking you because for whatever reason, premature or not, he seems to have as much as like interest and optimism about the potential that you seem to have as well. So I think maybe you guys just like, if you go on the date, you know, just pull back and just be like, well, you know, you have this dog, but let's just grab a cup of coffee and go from there. But like this, like, I need to meet your dog.
Well, that's the part that concerned me just from a health perspective is I like care about this guy's safety and he's asking to meet your dog, but I thought he's like deeply allergic. Oh, he wants to see just how allergic he is?
Yeah, I think he wants to test it out.
Oh gosh, that's the dangerous. Okay. Yeah,
That's
I don't know.
a lot of pressure. Now that you put it that way, of like, he wants to see how allergic he is to my
like, what
dog?
if he has a really bad reaction? You're going to feel terrible. And I don't know.
I think maybe if you have any interest in seeing him, you should say, let's table the dog conversation for now and just like
meet without the dog first.
See if we like, to see where this goes and see if we like each other. He's probably on some level just being like, everyone like has a fucking dog. I'm gonna have to figure this out. So like, he's trying to work with you.
But it's a good point, Nick. It's like there's so many other hurdles you two would have to cross than the dog one before the dog one even became relevant. Like, do we like each other? Do we actually enjoy spending time together?
How old is your dog?
She's 2.
Okay, so she's going to be here for a while.
she's gonna
Yeah, she's pretty young.
I mean, if you were like, she's, 12, I'd been like, well, maybe by the time you guys need to move in with each other.
Well, the thing is, I thought about the same thing too. I'm like, well, she's a little older. It's a little sad to think about, but she's around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think the issue I'm having too is now that he's said these things about my dog and like my cleanliness, like I'm getting the ick, and I don't want to get the ick.
Well, if you have the ick, just
No, we have to worry. We have to think of ways to get over the ick.
Yeah, you can't let the ick be disqualifying.
No, you can't.
No, the ick can be a transient state. I think that we need to try to resist
we
the
have
ick.
given too much credit to the ick. We've given it too much valid, it's... So yes, we have to work through our icks because we treat them like non-negotiables.
Dating that I've been having an issue with is that I get the ick very quickly, and that's something I'm trying to work on. But I don't know how to stop.
Well, go on. So maybe don't waste your time, but try to encourage yourself to go on dates and just have an open mind and try to learn something new about them and see if that new thing is an attractive thing that you learned, despite the other ick about it, in a different department. Like, people are multifaceted. They have different layers. Like, trust me, no matter what, like if you get in a serious relationship, the person you end up with has a ton of icks. You're just like now in love with them and stuck. It's trying to figure out, not stuck, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you're pot committed, like you care. And it's all icks I think, are bad habits people reveal to the people they're dating just a little too early.
Or things that are foreign to us, right? Like, we're not used to that particular mannerism and it just takes some getting used to, for example. But again, I think my like TLDR would be, if you were going to go on a date with this guy, like, make the dog like a fourth date sort of situation. Meeting the dog, a fourth date situation.
She's like meeting my child, like I'm like a child.
Also, like, and then like you've already covered it. Like, the dog shouldn't come up in conversation in the first date.
Yes.
Like, let's just figure out other things and more focus on getting to know each other outside of the dog.
Conversations about air purifier quality, not really a great. Yeah.
And just do that. But I think as someone who's kind of, trying to have this, new to dating and be adventurous. Be adventurous and just try to go out and meet new people and have the mindset of not trying to, decide who these people are before you even get to know them. I mean, you're getting icks about a guy you've never met. That's premature, So a lot of those icks are just like, it must be things that are going on in your head. I mean, certainly he's doing things, but like you have never met him. So like, someone asking you about cleanliness wouldn't, in a lot of other scenarios, wouldn't give you the ick. You just don't know him. And so you've created this kind of character of who he is rather than who he actually is.
Yeah. And I think the other thing other question I kind of have is being newer to the dating scene. Like I'm getting out of a situationship that I just realize it's not going anywhere out of here. I'm done. We're done. And so I'm going out and going out with my friends and stuff, but they're all in relationships. So it's been very tough to like put myself out there when I'm out trying to meet new people. So I have like one or two single friends. So it's kind of like, how do I put myself out there? Because like in the city that I'm in, there's so many single people, but it's just like when I go out, I'm not surrounded by enough people to like act like a group of single fun people,
Just got to be patient and give yourself time. These things aren't going to happen overnight, And so maybe focus more on meeting friends rather than people you should date, like build up your friend group. When you have a couple single friends, just be adventurous about meeting new people who can become your friends rather than people you could possibly date. And then from there, just be more open-minded.
Okay.
And just try that out.
So I guess going back to
I vote go on the date and don't talk about
the no dog.
And and just kind of set that up front expectation with him. I'm like, hey, I think we should go on a date and we should table the dog conversations and see how we actually just feel about each other for now. Because neither of you are going to like propose to the other person after the first date. Like you stop acting like.
And if you do too much advanced planning around the dog situation, like you might not even like each other on that first date. And so it's just a waste of time, right? Make sure that you actually like each other before you start talking about the logistical elements.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cause I also haven't talked to him in a couple days. Cause again, the dog thing got brought up and I was really trying to move past it. And knowing I was on here, I was just like, let's move past it. Let's not really talk about my dog just because like I know that if you meet her, she will probably have some type of allergic reaction. So I'd rather like us continue to get to know each other. So I haven't talked to him in a little bit. And so I'm like, how do I just text him out of the blue? Like ask if he wants to grab a drink this week?
Yeah.
Like, do you think, look, okay.
Yeah. Just keep it super casual and simple. Like that's the thing. I think you should focus on making friends and be open to dating and then just kind of keep your dates casual for now and just focus, especially the first and second date, about just learning about who they are as a person and not necessarily thinking about their potential as a partner until you've figured out a good sense of who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I was reading your book, also love your book, by the way. I was reading like the chapters about like first dates is kind of where, and like being single is where I've really like kind of focused my reading. And so I liked in the book that it was like asking questions, get to know each other. Cause like you guys said it perfectly. I'm like, I might not even like him when I meet him. So I think I want to focus on like asking those good questions about like who he is as a person and his interests versus like about my dog and like things and like the potential future. Cause it just like, you never know what could happen. So.
Exactly. All right. Well, keep us posted and let us know what
Good
you decide to
luck.
do.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Maya, it's been great. I wish we could talk more.
Thanks for having me. This is really fun.
Please let my audience know all the great things you're doing. Obviously, you have your podcast, A Slight Change of Plans. Anything else you want them to be aware of and follow?
Yeah, so A Slight Change of Plans, check it out anywhere you get podcasts. The nice thing about the show, all the episodes are very timeless. So if you go back into the feed, they will apply to your life no matter when they were put out. And then I'm on Instagram and I wasn't on Instagram the last time I came on here because I was resisting social media, but I'm finally took the plunge.
Next stop,
my handle is Dr. Maya Shankar, so DrMayaShankar.
And are you excited or about Zach being the Bachelor?
I'm about him being the Bachelor. Yeah. It's really unfortunate, but he seems like a nice guy.
Well, maybe there'll still be good drama with the cast of
women. With the cast of women. Yeah.
We'll see. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Don't forget to send in those questions at asknick@theviallfiles.com for anything all things Ask Nick. Next week, don't forget we have Justin Baldoni on the podcast. That should be a great conversation. He's got some great books about masculinity and men and dating, and that'll be fun to talk with Justin about. And be sure to tune in next week on Going Deeper. And I think that's it.
Okay, Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for watching, but before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss any future videos like our Mondays Ask Nick for your favorite relationship stories and advice, and our Tuesday Bachelor recaps. See you next time.